There is a great need for a detailed and serious analysis on Russian armed forces' current capabilities. Media reports of Russian military buildup along NATO's border in the Baltic region, news about Russian hypothetical vast rearmament program, or, again, mounting concerns over Russian maneuvers and exercises, like the Zapad training occurred in Belarus on September 2017, with the possibility to trigger a Georgia-Ukraine-style invasion. And, lastly, Russian intervention in Ukraine and Syria. All of this has created the sense of a return of the threat coming from the east. Suddenly, the image of the Soviet tanks rolling down the streets of the Eastern European cities re-emerged almost 30 years after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The Baltic states and other Eastern European countries started therefore to panic and pressed for a urgent NATO deployment on the border with Russia. Serious military analysts noticed that only recently Russia started to modernize its forces in the Baltic area, and informed by NATO's troop deployment. To add some bitter irony, even one non-expert in military matters could read the news on June 2016 about the firing of almost all Russian Baltic Fleet officers and those of the divisions employed in the Baltic area because of the embarrassing readiness level, plain incompetence and corruption. Add to this the terrible equipment conditions of the troops in that area, especially before the modernization program started to consider them too. And you get the typical invasion force. Apart from some fantasy report, the military reforms and the modernization program launched in 2008 has indeed started to transform the Russian military. The goal of the military reforms is to abandon the Soviet-era mass mobilization army, increase the proportion of professional soldiers and decrease that of the conscripts, while still retaining the right to mobilize the population in case of any contingency, and improving the readiness level, deployment speed and mobility. Whereas the force reduction and reorganization plan is lagging due to the unwillingness of the military involved, the improvements in the readiness level have been successfully tested in the Ukraine and Syria campaigns. Russia is the third country in the world for numbers of military satellites and has its own navigation system, GLONASS, which constitute the lion's share of the military satellite numbers, together with communication satellites. Russia's space activities are suffering because of the relative lack of funds, consequence of the low oil prices and because of the Western sanctions. Both have greatly compromised either Russian economy and the availability of circuitry and other advanced components. By taking into consideration these factors, China is now considered the direct contender of the US dominance in space. We do not know how many tanks Russia have or may deploy. For sure, there are lots of in the deposits, and many of them are very outdated or just usable for spare parts. Yet, being Russia mainly a land power, it is probably still the military which possesses the highest number of tanks in the world. Nonetheless, despite the very impressive Russian new model, T-14 Armada, Russian armored divisions rely much more on heavily upgraded tanks. Not even T-90, but T-72 is the real protagonist here, although heavily modernized. It is really important to see if Russia will be able to order more T-14s, and to see how fast will fix the issues seemingly affecting T-14's engine, as seen in 2015 Moscow Victory Day parade. The overall situation of the Russian armored components of its forces, but this opinion might easily include the rest of the Russian armed forces, is that they rely heavily on modernized Soviet-era equipment. Most of the time, the high quality and reliability this equipment had during the Cold War is still somewhat relevant today, but exposes Russian armed forces to a series of deficiencies that would rapidly become pressing needs in case of a future prolonged war effort against a better prepared conventional enemy. Russia still uses BMP-1, dating back to the first years of the Cold War. Even considering the more modern BMP-2, this armored vehicle is extremely vulnerable to basically anything beyond 25mm cannons or 50 caliber anti-armor bullets, and there is not even to mention its capability to withstand the explosion of modern improvised explosive devices or mobile launched shaped charged missiles from 50 to 60mm onward. For this reason, these vehicles are just used to transport soldiers on the front line. Russia could really have the means to address most of these issues with the new developed Armata Universal Combat Platform design to be used for many armored vehicle classes, but budgetary constraints caused these updates to be postponed. Nonetheless, despite its complicated economic situation, Russia has been able to focus on at least an area on which it can really display absolute excellence. We are talking about its advanced air defense systems. Russia's army has always been renowned for its superlative artillery, and Russia has a huge number of batteries. The Russian artillery, however, needs a modernization program and a serious precision ammunition procurement and development. Ukraine's campaign has shown the echelon how deadly a battery salvo with precision ammo can be. Russian air defense systems, however, this is without any doubt the single most important thing one needs to discuss about when referring to Russian armed forces. Since the Soviet era, Russia invested a lot in air defense systems. With an enemy, the US, possessing the most powerful air force in the world, relying for a consistent part of its strategy on deep precision strikes from above and from its surface-launched cruise missiles, and aerial dominance, and considering Russia have always been considered top expert on missile technology, well, that appeared like a natural step. As a result, Russia now possesses some of the very best air defense systems in the world. Russia has been among the first nations to pioneer the use of a layered integrated air defense systems, HIEDS. Such system has been defined Anti-Access Area Denial, A2AD. Russia Operational Air Defense Doctrine uses a three-tier system. The first tier consists of long-range systems such as S-400 Triumph, also known as SA-21 Growler. This anti-aircraft system is an upgrade of S-300 system and uses 4 different missiles, each one with its range. The very long-range 40N6, 400 km, the long-range 48N6, 250 km, the medium-range 9M96E2, 120 km, and the short-range NM96E, 40 km. S-400 Triumph uses an active electronically scanned array and is capable to detect a target up to a distance of 600 km and 400 km for aerodynamic targets. The very long-range missile, 40N6, can reach a speed of 4.8 km per second, is capable to engage low-altitude targets, and is speculated it can reach an altitude of 185 km, while the other missiles have other strengths, like IG maneuvers and even better capabilities against stealth or low-altitude targets. It is definitely one of the most powerful anti-aircraft systems in the world. A successor of this system, but designed with a stronger anti-ballistic capability, is S-500 Prometheus, still in development. This system might reach an even higher speed, be able to engage ballistic missiles at a range of 600 km and 400 km against aircrafts, and its radar might reach a radius of 3000 km. The second tier consists of medium-range systems like S-300 and the Buk family of air defense systems, direct successor of one of the most successful surface-to-air missiles ever, 2K-12 Kub, also known as S-86 Gadfly. The main reason behind the deployment of these systems is to increase the radar coverage and redundancy and to complement the low number of Tier 1 systems. The latest Buk M3 version demonstrated its ability to shoot an anti-ship missile at an altitude of just 5 meters. S-300, although is surpassed by the S-400, is still regarded as one of the best. It showed great performances in exercises against both aircrafts and ballistic missiles. The sole presence of this system has to be considered a great threat, even against the most advanced stealth 5th generation aircrafts available nowadays, or those still in development. The third and final layer of this seemingly impenetrable defense consists of older systems like 9K33 OSA, also known as SA-8 Jiko, and the even older S-125 Neva Pekora, also known as SA-3 Goa. 9K-33 OSA is still quite relevant to these days. During the recent Syrian civil war, it was used by rebels to successfully shoot down a Syrian Me-17 helicopter. Nonetheless, far more relevant is the complement to all these systems. 2K-22 Tunguska and the newest and more capable Pantsir S-1. These are point defense systems armed with both missiles and 30mm autocannons, and are basically the guardians of the other air defense systems, as they can engage very low altitude targets, can fire on the move, and can react to a threat in 5 to 6 seconds. Although lacking the range and the sophisticated capabilities of the other systems, they are the direct answer against ground attack aircrafts and helicopters specialized to hunt down ground vehicles like the Android of Apache in the US inventory. As formidable as this air defense may seem, however, it doesn't imply Russia is invulnerable. US has a huge fleet of AWACS and elite aircrafts with very powerful radars, advanced electronic warfare capabilities, the highest number of military satellites, some of them unreachable by any missile. And furthermore, Russian airspace is just so big that it could be virtually impossible to be able to guard and protect against a serious penetration in multiple directions. Russian capabilities in this field act more as a powerful deterrent, with the assurance to be able to inflict an unsustainable cost in lives and equipment to any potential attacker. Now, in case some of you is wondering why at this point we don't talk about Russian nuclear weapons, that happens because we will cover this topic in the next videos, because really, there is so much to talk about this topic that deserve a video on its own. Most of the analysis concerning the Russian Navy tend to depict a completely different portrait. Who describes the Russian Navy as ready to challenge the US counterpart, and who describes it as a floating disaster of decrepit ships, and not even many of them. Those that describe Russian Navy as a giant are just in search of sensationalistic reports, while the latter perhaps don't read news and military-related reports at all. The fact is, Russian Navy has never been as active since the Soviet Union collapse. Yes, a bunch of their ships like Admiral Kuznetsov aircraft carrier and Pyotr Velikiy battle cruisers need tugboats to be able to take to the high seas, but reports completely miss a point. Russia uses these ships more for status projection and diplomacy than else. Its power lies on other units, at least for the time being. Budgetary constraint has caused lots of delays, and high corruption cases have certainly not helped. And to add even more to all these problems, the war with Ukraine has deprived Russia of Ukrainian gas turbines, especially those needed by the biggest ships. And the same applies for the breakdown of defense collaborations with European countries. Russian efforts to rebuild a healthy shipbuilding industry are truly admirable, especially in the face of sanctions and economic constraints. In this regard, Russia has built new shipyards in the east and is working on new indigenous propulsion systems, as 5 frigates, 3 Gorshkov and 2 Grigorovich class, are still waiting to be completed. In the meantime, Russia is building corvettes until it's able to develop and build a reliable indigenous engine for bigger ships. The point is, these corvettes keep getting bigger and bigger and have capabilities that absolutely exceed their class. Some of them, like Steregushchi class, are de facto frigates, but no need to take in consideration the biggest corvettes. Let's just consider Buyan M corvettes. Now, you may laugh at them with their 950 tons compared to a 10 times heavier Ticonderoga cruiser class or equally heavier Harley-Burke destroyers. The problem is, these bigger ships can be destroyed as any ship by a missile salvo or a single one, and certainly would be if the missiles are not intercepted. Buyan M can carry Onyx and 3M54 caliber cruise missiles. P-800 Onyx is a supersonic anti-ship cruise missile that can cruise just some meters above the water surface, making detection very difficult and interception even worse. With its speed of nearly Mach 2.5, P-800 Onyx was used as basis for what is probably the best cruise missile around, Brahmos, and one can understand its value if reflects about the fact that Tomahawk and Harpoon missiles are subsonic, and for example, another famous missile, the French Exocet, has a max range of max 70 km against 600 km of the P-800. 3M54 caliber is even deadlier. 500 kg of conventional or nuclear warhead. Its relatively low weight allows smaller ships like Puyan M corvettes to carry 8 of these deadly weapons in their vertical launcher cells. Just one of these missiles could sink a destroyer. It is another difficult to intercept missile, as at around 60 km from its target, the solid fuel stage separates from the missile, that then accelerates to a supersonic speed of Mach 2.5 to 2.9, sprinting in its final approach to the target. It needs to be added that this missile can perform IG high-speed maneuvers to avoid interception in spite of following a linear path. So, basically, it will be of very little comfort to laugh at Russian decrepit ship in the case a caliber missile is launched and is approaching your ship. From the moment it starts to sprint 60 km away from your ship, you will have just 1 minute and 10 seconds to try to shoot it down, this IG high-speed maneuvering supersonic missile. Almost 30% of the Soviet-era ships are receiving major modernization programs, like Udaloy destroyers, that will be armed with caliber missile. Skepticism was expressed regarding the ability of Semmash shipyard to simultaneously modernize 2 Kirov-class battlecruisers. Modernization of Admiral Nakimov is ongoing, to be completed by the end of 2018, with the modernization of Pyotr Veliki to last from 2018 to 2021. The real best Russian ships, anyway, are its submarines. Sure, we are quite far from the Soviet-era numbers, but we are talking about the second most powerful submarine force, just behind US Navy. Russia is investing a lot on its submarine force, especially because many of them are going toward the inevitable end of their life, and in the decade between 2020 and 2030, Russia would need to substitute at least 50–60% of the whole submarine fleet. Nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines fleet, for example, has 3 Borei-class submarines, which have passed over the mid of their life cycle, with 4 more upgraded versions under construction and 1 already launched on 2017, for a total of 7. The rest includes the glorious Typhoon left, Dmitry Donskoy, belonging to the biggest class of submarines ever built, and the equally old Deltas. Borei-class submarines will just substitute them. As Borei is not a truly modern class, the first laid down on 1996, a substitution is already under planning. Russia planned to upgrade either nuclear-powered cruise missile submarines and nuclear-powered attack submarines, not all of them though. In September 2015, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu announced that at least 3 Oscar-class submarines will be modernized so as to be able to carry more and better missiles, which means this class will substitute P-700 with up to 72 P-800 Onyx and caliber missiles. Shchuka B Akula class will probably share a similar destiny. The only thing we are sure about this class is that they are being deployed, and in August 2009, 2 of them were off the US East Coast, for the first time after the end of the Cold War, while in August 2012, 1 of them operated undetected in the Gulf of Mexico for over a month. Victor 3 will probably be retired, while Sierra's super-resistant titanium design will allow this class to serve the Russian Navy for many years. It must be noted, however, the real big absence: a submarine class based on air-independent propulsion system. Russia is working on it. Speculations talk about a project named Kalina, and analysts say Russia could be able to start building these silent killers by 2020. Trying to describe Russian air forces is not an easy feat. The difficulty lies on the fact that Russia, after almost 3 decades of total chaos, has only recently started to commission new equipment. The research and development of new aircrafts, the modern requirements, new challenges, and the changed geopolitical landscape make a precise statement on Russian Air Force a truly daunting task. Soviet air forces were widely recognized as fully capable to challenge those of the NATO's counterpart, at the very least able to contest the vast Soviet airspace. Nowadays, it still remains a very capable force, but still retain most of the aircrafts of the Soviet era, although heavily upgraded. Doubts remain on the numbers of those still active, but it is still possible to analyze which of those constitute the bulk of the force in their respective categories. MiG-29 is a frontline light to medium air superiority fighter, has a very low internal fuel capacity, so it can be used to protect frontline installations, troops, and ward against immediate aerial threats. It shares some similarities with Sukhoi 27 because Sukhoi and Mikoyan teams joined together for a while in the development phase. One can say that MiG-29 is the cheaper version of the Sukhoi 27, but this is not enough. Sukhoi 27 is a long-range heavy fighter with better engines, much more internal fuel capacity, more hardpoints to carry more weapons, better avionics, and its engine is more efficient, both fuel-wise than in maneuverability, while MiG-29 has higher cruise and max speed, lower minimum speed, in general is more responsive on very fast speed maneuvers, and it's suitable to carry air-to-ground weapons. Over the years, Mikoyan kept on upgrading and further developed MiG-29. In the end, a carrier-based version MiG-29K with advanced components, especially in avionic, more internal fuel capacity, heavier and capable to carry more weapons, will substitute Sukhoi 33, Sukhoi 27 carrier-based model. Sukhoi 30 is fast, extremely maneuverable, especially in dogfights, very good autonomy and can carry quite a good amount of weapons. It is lethal against just any 4th generation fighter. As new 5th generation fighters threatens the sky, however, this aircraft has lost much of its appeal because it has a huge radar cross-section, and as such it definitely belongs to a past era against the modern way to conduct aerial warfare, based on long-range weapons, stealthiness and long-range radar detection. MiG-31 is a heavier aircraft designed for long-range missions, ranging from escorting bombers to intercept cruise missiles. As such, it is not designed for close combat. It is also used as an armored AWACS, as 4 or 5 of these aircrafts can cover an area of 900 kilometers with their powerful radar. Sukhoi 34 is an advanced multi-role fighter, although is more capable as a fighter than a bomber. As most modern Russian aircrafts, its design is based on the very successful Sukhoi 27. The idea was to make up for the lack of ground attack capability of the Sukhoi 27 while being a top performer air superiority fighter. Sukhoi 35 is a far better, modern and heavily upgraded version of the Sukhoi 27. As a reduced front radar cross-section, thus representing Russia's first serious attempt to produce more stealthy aircraft, one of the most important features defining a 5th generation fighter. It might be seen as a Sukhoi 27 with applied technologies being developed for the much-awaited Sukhoi 57 5th generation fighter. Not that much to say about Sukhoi 24 and Sukhoi 25. Sukhoi 24 is an attack aircraft, very old but still highly respected, and will eventually be completely replaced by the new Sukhoi 34, while the Sukhoi 25 is a close air support aircraft. There could be much more to say about Russian armed forces, as with any of the country analyzed in this series, but we will end this video with quite a lazy "we will see". What we know for sure is Russia is making truly impressive progresses, especially considering its economic and diplomatic situation. The challenge will be to be able to both keep on the development of new technologies and to field new equipments, so to be able to exert war diplomacy and retake its role among great powers back again.